Okay. So we have a 3-item agenda, and I'd like to welcome the Minister Coveney, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine, and his officials. So the forthcoming session 1 is the forthcoming EU Council meeting of Agriculture and Fisheries, Agri-Fish and Sea Fisheries Sustainability Impact Assessment. So just remind members and witnesses to turn off their mobile phones, please. So I'll ask the Minister to make his opening statement, please.
So you want us to do this first rather than the freezer vessels, do you?
Sorry?
Sorry. The order in which you want us to deal with the 3 things? I thought we were going to do freezer vessels first, but
no. You can do whatever you like. We've 2 other items on the agenda after yours. Sorry, you've a 3-item within your.
Well, you know, but I just wanted to respond to a request from the committee to deal with the freezer vessels.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, do indeed. Yeah.
Sorry, we can do it another day if you want.
No, do it now. Actually, please. There was a letter sent in on behalf of the committee by Deputy Pat Deering, Vice Chair.
Okay. Firstly, the committee has asked me to deal with the reporting requirements of fishing vessels entering Ireland's exclusive fisheries zone. In terms of quota, the situation is that all fishing opportunities set down in the TAC and quota regulation each year is set down for member states. However, quotas are not allocated in relation to member states' exclusive fisheries zones, but are instead set out in relation to one or more what's called ISIS areas, which is the International Commission for the Exploration of the Seas. ISIS areas cut across exclusive fisheries zone boundaries. The quota allocations associated to each ISIS area or areas of operation must be strictly adhered to by individual member states. Furthermore, the collection and transmission of catch and landings data is mandatory. However, the EU does not require vessels to inform the coastal member state the quota made available to them when entering the exclusive fisheries zone to fish. The Sea Fisheries Protection Authority have advised me that the following arrangements apply. On entering Ireland's exclusive fisheries zone, the vessel's VMS, which is a vessel monitoring system, will provide the National Fisheries Monitoring Centre at the naval base in Haulbowline with its position, which in turn is relayed to all naval vessels at sea and to all SFPA port offices. The plots of the vessel's position are recorded every 15 minutes, with the operational display refreshed every 2 hours, while the vessel is operational in Irish waters. The 15-minute positions are held within the vessel system on board and can be called down if there is a catch area review required where the level of 2-hourly detail would not be sufficient. When the vessel commences fishing, the vessel electronic reporting system, or the ERS, will open the vessel's fishing logbook to be viewed by the FMC, and in turn all Sea Fisheries Protection Authority operational staff, and will relay by way of submission of record by the vessel master the detail of the fishing gear in use, the duration of each fishing operation, the location by longitude and latitude of the fishing operation, the species, catches, discards, should they occur, in kilos, being taken on board while the vessel is active in Irish waters. In relation to the overall framework for fisheries controls in the EU, in October 2009, a new regulation dealing with fisheries controls was adopted. Council Regulation 1224/2009 establishes a community-controlled system for ensuring compliance with the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy. Control and inspection is now focused where it is most effective through an approach based on systematic risk analysis. Inspection procedures are standardised and harmonised for all stages in the market chain, including transport and marketing. The control regulations were introduced so that there is a common EU level playing field and to provide for an effective range of controls across EU waters. In relation to freezer fishing vessels, the committee has also requested that I address the possibility that large freezer fishing vessels carry on board independent fisheries monitoring personnel for periods of operation in Ireland's exclusive fisheries zone. The SFPA and the Naval Service, through the Fisheries Monitoring Centre, has monitored the movements of these vessels when in our EFZ using the vessel monitoring system, automatic identification system, and declared catches through electronic reporting systems, or the electronic logbook as it's known. I'm advised that there are 4 fishing vessels currently in our exclusive fisheries zone. I'm advised that no inspections have been conducted in recent days due to adverse weather conditions. The reality here is that in order to board one of these vessels, these are ships, right? You do need to have weather that can allow you to do that safely, because you drop a rib from a naval vessel and you need to go alongside one of these vessels and get on board. If you have large swells, and these vessels operate quite a long way out to sea most of the time, if you have big swells, it's very, very difficult for us to do that. But the Naval Service are very conscious of the concern and so are anxious to make boardings and inspections. This risk assessment had informed the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority's identification of some of those vessels as a high priority for at-sea inspection and aircraft surveillance. The SFPA is reliant on the seagoing fisheries patrol activity of the Naval Service to verify compliance of vessels not landing into Ireland. The weather has been particularly severe in the recent past. Boarding vessels of this size at sea creates specific challenges, and to date the operational decision of the Naval Service has been that weather has been too severe to safely attempt a boarding operation. I am advised that the Naval Service has ships on patrol and are ready to conduct boarding operations on these vessels when weather conditions permit. In terms of the control measures available to the control authorities within the North West Waters Membership States Group, we are examining additional control measures to support the landing obligation. The ban on discarding pelagic stocks such as herring and mackerel came into effect on the 1st of January 2015. A control experts group from the North West Waters Regional Group of Member States has been set up and has produced a draft set of recommendations on additional control measures for the pelagic sector in respect of the landing obligation of pelagic fisheries. The view of the Pelagic Advisory Council on the recommendations have been received and will be fully considered. The draft recommendations of the control experts and the Pelagic Advisory Council views are being considered by the North Western Waters Membership States Group. That's a sort of a collective group of countries that are fishing in similar areas and have similar interests that collectively try to make strategic and policy decisions and implementation decisions. The measures recommended by the control expert cover a range of actions, including the use of cameras or other remote sensing equipment on all large pelagic vessels, both freezer vessels and on our refrigerated seawater tank vessels, or RSWs as they're called, to support the landing obligation. It also recommends control observers for individual trips to address assessed risks for a more transient nature. It is important to note that the flag member state would be responsible for placing control observers on its vessels. I consider that any strengthened control measures must provide tools to both the flag member state and the coastal member state to better monitor the controlled fishing activities. In other words, I wouldn't be satisfied with the idea that if there's a Dutch-owned vessel that they have a Dutch-owned observer in Irish waters. I think we need to reassure people here, and I think the way to do that is to have, Irish controls in place in the waters that we have responsibility for. We will continue to work closely with the North Western Waters Membership States to identify the control actions that are most useful so that the landing obligation is fully respected. Finally, it's important to point out that the control of fishing vessels within Ireland's exclusive fisheries zone is a matter for the Irish control authorities who monitor fishing activity of all vessels operating in the area. As Minister, I am precluded from getting involved in the operational matters, including in relation to law enforcement, and that's for good reason in terms of past experience. So, hopefully that's a helpful statement for people in terms
I'll
of
let members come
understanding.
in.
But if people have questions, obviously we'll answer.
on the full.
Take that first, Chairman, I think.
Okay.
It'll only just get tossed around.
All right, then. Deputy Ferris.
Good morning, and thank you, Minister, for your response. Like probably Deputy Harrington, Deputy Pringle and myself, of course, areas we've been contacted by very, very concerned people regarding the actions, particularly off, of course, the Donegal, the Margrees and other factory freezer ships operating there. And obviously the big problem of what we've been told is that the only way that you will be able to have police them properly is to having a control observer on the vessel. Now, from your presentation here, it would appear that the Control Experts Advisory Council note that a flag member state will be responsible for placing control observers on the vessel. I think it's essential that the member state, if vessels are operating on the Irish waters and given the concern that is there and so forth, it's essential, it's imperative that any observer, that observers on board would have to include somebody from the SFPA or somebody in relation to that would be having responsibility for the jurisdiction and the protection of fish in our jurisdiction. A lot has been said. There was a programme shown in I think it's Holland, on board one of those vessels, where they have graders and they have I'm not quite sure I got the right words, minchers or whatever, but they munch up all the discard and let them off over the side or actually underneath the boat, underneath the vessel. So if that is happening, the amount of discard has been mentioned on this programme that I'm told reliably is up to 70% discard, and that's does terrible damage to the fish stocks if it's true. So I would, is it your assessment from the Advisory Council that a control observer will come from when vessels are fishing in Irish waters will be somebody from the SFPA? Can you say definitively or reasonably accurately that the percentage of quota allocated to those vessels is what you're being told when they are in Irish waters, the percentage of quota that they have left? Are some of these vessels landing outside the EU jurisdiction? And you share the same concerns that I and others have in relation to what is happening at present.
Deputy Pringle.
Thanks, Chairman. I'd like to thank the Minister for his response, although it probably raises more questions than it really answers. There's a number of things. I mean, there's been huge concern over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks or so in relation to the operation of these vessels off the west coast. As you say, there is 4 there today, and there has been various stages, 4 or 5, operating continuously over the last number of weeks. And I'm wondering, I mean, you're talking about the control measures and stuff like that there that have been discussed at the North West Waters Council or whatever. I mean, would it be possible for the SFPA or the Navy to ask these vessels to come into closer to shore to allow an inspection to take place where it's safe to do so? And is that not something that should be within the control suite or the suite of measures that the Navy or the SFPA could actually use in terms of these vessels? Because, I mean, the Margaret today is only a couple of hours out of Killybegs, out of Bruckless Bay, whereas you could be asked or instructed to come in and be inspected there. At least that would be something in relation to how they can be looked at and can be worked at. The Navy and the SFPA have continuously said over the last number of weeks that the weather has been too bad to allow any boardings to take place. I mean, are the Navy sitting off these vessels? Are they watching what they're at the minute? Because the Margaret, according to the SFPA, has only quota for horse mackerel in Irish waters and has no quota for anything else. So therefore, the Margaret, if it's not catching clean horse mackerel, has to be breaching the discard ban in terms of that's been in place since the 1st of January. So, I mean, what visual inspections have been taking place, what monitoring is actually going on? Are you just totally relying on their electronic logbook as a way of trying to police the operations of this vessel, which is quota for horse mackerel only, so there has to be something else happening out there. My information from talking to fishermen that it's difficult to get clean horse mackerel off the west coast of Ireland at this time of year, and particularly with the bad weather that we've had as well. It's difficult as well because the weather disperse the horse mackerel even if they were clean and break them up and that. So I'm just wondering what the department or what the SFPA or the Navy have been doing over the last 4 or 5 weeks in relation to this. You also say that in your contribution here that inspection procedures are standardised and harmonised for all stages in the market chain, including transport and marketing. Now, as I understand that, there's a requirement when the fish are sold at the home port or whatever that has to be reported back as well through the EU level or whatever. And particularly, there is, I know that in one instance, the Spanish vessels have sustainable fishing certification for hake within the Irish waters, but yet it's noted in that certification that there's no returns of sale figures when they land in Spanish ports available. So do we have the same problem here with the Margaret lands in Holland? What figures do you get in terms of what was caught in the exclusive Irish zone? So, I mean, how do you actually know and are sure what is actually happening there in relation to it? Also, just a couple of weeks ago, the Margaret and the other vessels towed away large numbers of crab pots and that they belonging to fishermen in Donegal. And I've been advised by the SFPA that that's a criminal matter under the reportable to the Gardaí and not covered by the towing away of fishing gear by these vessels. That it's a civil criminal matter rather than a matter for the SFPA. So how would somebody, if they reported it to the Gardaí, how would the guards actually interview the masters of these vessels when they stay offshore and don't land in Irish ports, and can they be asked to come in? So there's huge questions there in relation to actually how this is policed and how we can police it as a member state, and particularly when you look at how rigorously our own vessels are policed and monitored, to allow these vessels to operate with virtual impunity in our waters is very difficult for fishing communities to accept and to understand. And if I could, just in relation to the observers question, I've asked this in PQs as well, and the answer has always been that if observers were placed on board, it's important to remember that they would be from the flag member state, as if that kind of implies that, well, then we wouldn't know what's happening anyway because they're on board, they're from the flag member state rather than from ourselves. But I understand that there is already provision there for observers to be there, and what are we doing actually to make that happen? Are we raising this at European level? Are we raising it with the flag member states that it should be? And particularly when you talk about that it's assessed risks of a more transient nature, surely the fact that the Margaret is here fishing only has quota for a single species, that would be a risk.
Sorry, Deputy, that's not accurate.
Well, that's the information I was told.
Sorry, I'll give you the information. I just don't, I mean, to be fair, you may have got that information, but I'll give you the information that I have in a second, but it's important that we're just accurate here. I have a lot of sympathy with what you're saying, but I think it's important that we be accurate in terms of things like...
Well, I'll take that if the manager can point out where I'm wrong at, but the SFPA have advised me that they have only quota for horse mackerel and not for anything else in Irish waters.
They have nearly 650 tonnes of mackerel in terms of quota as well.
Well, that's the SFPA gave the wrong information then as well in response to queries in relation to the operations of the vessel as well. Okay, I'll leave it at that, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for providing that report to the committee. And look, I mean, the truth is that it has caused considerable comment, not just in coastal communities as it happens. It has almost become very much a national debate, particularly on social media and on some of the industry publications as well. The four vessels, I believe, the Margaret, the Annalise, Elena, the Jean Marie, the Willem van der Zwaan, they're both Lithuanian
Dutch, German, I suppose. If we take what they're saying and their association, which has issued press releases also, that they're operating here in good faith, is there any reason, for example, that we can't ask them before they enter Irish controlled waters that they would come to port, just for a brief few hours for an inspection before they hit the fishing grounds, and similarly as they leave, that they would similarly come to a port if the boarding can't be done by authorised officials, that they would be inspected at a port before they leave. These are not just fishing vessels, they're processors. That's the way I think they should be dealt with. And we see, for example, in other in processors in factories ashore, you have cameras, you have inspections, you have quite a lot of self-reporting at times, but the regime is a little bit different. And I think what we're looking for here, you have 4 processing vessels with a huge capability, not just to catch fish, and we'll take the face value that they're catching within their quotas, but to process, and the rules I think should apply in Irish territorial waters equally with processors on shore. And I think a pre fishing inspection and a post fishing inspection in our controlled waters, I think should be, if they are genuine, if they are in good faith, I can't see how, if they were requested, that wouldn't be or couldn't be facilitated by the vessel managers. If not, I agree with the Minister that if officials were to go aboard for on-board inspections, that they be Irish-based officials. A Lithuanian, Dutch or a German official, you know, I can't say they'd do anything differently, but the perception I don't think would be all wrong and would be difficult to manage. And I suppose also it is worth noting that we have a huge amount of foreign or visiting vessels that come into Irish waters, not just in the pelagic sector but also in the whitefish sector. But equally we have vessels, that Irish vessels fishing in other waters. For example, in Norwegian waters there's a cod quota caught by an Irish vessel. In UK waters there's a cuttlefish caught by Irish vessels. But the scale of it is just different. It is completely different, and I think that's where it's a huge perception issue. And I think a greater effort in being more proactive on enforcement would allay a lot of fears. And as the Deputy Pringle and Deputy Ferris have said, if they are working outside the law, I think that would be picked up very, very quickly on that type of inspection regime.
Okay. Minister, just respond quickly.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I share a lot of the concerns that people have, but I mean, can I say that to give the impression that these are vessels operating, with impunity? First of all, it's not accurate. I mean, like last year, this year, the skipper of the Annalise Elena, which is formerly the Atlantic Dawn, and is formerly an Irish boat. So let's take a look at ourselves in the mirror here too, right? Their skipper, who's a 58-year-old, was fined over €100,000 in Donegal Circuit Court after being found guilty by a jury on 3 charges of illegal fishing in Irish waters. So when we can, we are inspecting, and if there are problems, we bring these boats into port. Deputy Pringle will remember that vessel being in Donegal. I'm sure. Not when it was the Atlantic Dawn. Now, that's not meant to be a jibe, but over the this year, I know also, because I've spoken to the SFPA on this and the Naval Service on this. There is a desire to actually board and inspect these vessels. Part of the problem, though, is in the middle of winter, particularly given the last 3 weeks that we've had in terms of weather, there are safety considerations around that. My understanding is that there would be legal difficulties in requiring a vessel to come into port without having some cause for requiring them to do that, because a vessel of this size, that's quite an expensive thing for them to do, to come in and to spend a number of hours coming into port, tying up, having an inspection and heading back out to sea. So there needs to be a reason to bring vessels of that size into port. The other thing is just to give you a sense of the Deputy Pringle, just the information you have from the SFPA may have been right at the time that they gave it to you, but just the information I have today is that the database would show that Lithuania has a quota, and the Margaret is a Lithuanian flag vessel, that they have a quota of 644 tonnes of mackerel in our in ISIS zone 6, 7, 6B, and of which 544 tonnes have been caught. They also have a quota of 5,953 tonnes of horse mackerel, of which 4,000 tonnes have been caught. So they essentially do have a quota for a bycatch of mackerel, but whether they have got that through some kind of a swap arrangement, that may be the case, which would mean that actually the information you've gotten is technically correct, but that they have actually swapped to get some mackerel in order to be compliant when they're fishing here.
Well, that swap might only have taken place after they started fishing here, then.
I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, this is information we've had for a while. So
the EU, sorry, Minister, the EU allocation for Lithuania was 164 tonnes at the start of the year, so of mackerel in areas 6 and 7. So they may have only got that swap in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, or they may have done it before they came here. But I mean, the point here, the point that I'm saying is that they have paid for swaps, and therefore they do have a legal entitlement to catch both horse mackerel and some bycatch of mackerel as well. So, I mean, I can only take legal action if someone's breaking the rules and breaking the law. Now, it's very difficult. I mean, we are going on the logbook information that we can get in relation to these vessels. I'd like to be able to back that up by inspections and actually seeing what's happening on the vessels. I've made my view known. But I obviously don't want to force boardings of vessels in totally inappropriate or dangerous weather conditions. So, but like just to reassure people broadly, because I know, and I've got a lot of communications on this issue. We do board these vessels, we do inspect them, and if we find that people are breaking the rules, we bring them in and we prosecute them. And there's a good example of that this year already. Just to give you an idea in terms of the Netherlands, because the Netherlands will own most of these large vessels. They have a boarfish quota of 200 tonnes. They have northwest herring quota of just over 1,600 tonnes. They have a Celtic sea herring quota of 1,600 tonnes. They have horse mackerel quota of 36,000 tonnes, mackerel quota of 35,000 tonnes. And they have a blue whiting quota of 55,000 tonnes. So, as most people who understand the fishing industry will know, the pelagic sector in Europe is dominated by Dutch-flagged vessels. They are big players in this sector, and we sometimes see their boats here. But they have a quota that they're entitled to catch. They just happen to catch it in much bigger vessels than most other countries. And that, I think, is what's causing the concern. But because of that ability to catch huge volumes of fish, and by the way, some of our big vessels catch huge volumes of fish too, which will be very similar to what these vessels are catching in a day, but they don't have the capacity to process them on board as well. So the vessels aren't physically as large. But the actual fishing capacity in terms of the net size would be very similar, that's my understanding. So ultimately this comes down to enforcement and reassuring people that not only are we getting information from electronic logbooks, but also that we're putting people on vessels and physically inspecting, and that we're part of a decision around whether or not we put cameras on these vessels. But, you know, there'd be very mixed views within the fishing industry as to whether there should be cameras on vessels. But we're trying to actually come up with a balance that can reassure the broader public that actually the new rules of the Common Fisheries Policy in terms of grading of fish, in terms of discarding of fish, in terms of releasing large numbers of juvenile fish if the catch has an average size that's too small, that type of activity in the pelagic sector could involve very large volumes, and we need to stop it. And I think the industry is committed to that, but I think we need to convince the public that we have a control system that is showing that it's the case. And in very stormy conditions, in waters as large as Irish waters, even with the Naval Service on standby, which they are, it is challenging, and that's where we are today, given the weather conditions.
Okay. Very briefly, just arising from the ministers, I think it would be important, you know, for example, Margaret's achieved a swap of 644 tonnes, and I believe it came from another member state. I think it would be important to get it on the record. It didn't come from the Irish total global catch.
No, I mean, it would take a lot for us to give away any mackerel, I can tell you.
Well, we're going to get that on the record. And alternatively, they're swapped it for what and to whom?
Yeah, I mean, we can only speculate on that, but I mean, there are swaps that would go on within the pelagic sector between mackerel and horse mackerel or blue whiting or whatever, isn't there? And yeah, all swaps need to be notified to the Commission, so there will be a record of where they got that swap.
And can a swap occur between pelagic and demersal? Can you swap?
Oh yeah, they can. I mean, we have given in the past mackerel for whitefish, absolutely. And the industry has volunteered it when we're under a lot of pressure on whitefish. We've traded mackerel, absolutely.
Deputy Pringle, and then quickly.
Chairman, just in relation to when these vessels land in Holland or wherever and discharge their catch that they've got off the west coast, are they required, as I understand, they're required to inform ourselves in relation to what's been caught here and that it has the figures of the amount of fish that they've landed? Yeah, that they match up. Does that happen?
My understanding is that it does, to be honest, but I mean, our department doesn't manage the enforcement. I mean, that is the job of the SFPA. But I mean, that's how the system is supposed to work, that actually there's an electronic logbook which records what's been caught, what weight, what species, and then when it's landed in the port, that matches up. That's how it works, isn't it?
It doesn't happen in the case of Spanish hake. Caught in Irish waters, it doesn't happen in that case. So how do we know what happens? And surely as Minister, in terms of negotiating at Commission level and seeing how the whole CFP is operating, we should be aware of whether that actually happens.
If there are failures, it's up to the SFPA to get through to the member state and actually get the information that they're entitled to. Obviously, there are challenges when there are landings outside of the European Union, like the Faroes, like Norway, and so on. And I mean, some of our boats land into the Faroes and into Norway too. So this is a common issue. So I mean, I think we need to be careful that we're not pointing the finger here at other member states and saying that somehow these people are, abusing all the rules and so on. I mean, this applies to everybody fishing in the pelagic. Most pelagic boats in the northwestern waters are big boats catching very large volumes. What makes the freezer vessels different is that they process on board as well. So they're physically huge boats, and they're processing as they go, and that poses certain challenges because they can stay out an awful lot longer. And also when they're actually landing into port, I'm not sure how that's actually calculated from a weight point of view if they're processing at sea, but I presume there are some challenges there.
Okay. Just so we can be clear, just so that the reporting structures in terms of when they make their lands, it's up to the SFPA to follow up on that, and it's up to the SFPA to follow up with the member state if they're not getting the information. So it's really.
They do that, as far as I know, and they have a good relationship with the enforcement agencies in the other member states, and the way this should work technically is that wherever you're fishing, whatever member state, wherever you're fishing, whatever member state has a responsibility in that zone is there to enforce the rules. The electronic logbook should make available to everybody what boats are actually catching in terms of species and weights, and then when that catch is landed into a port, those figures should match up. I mean, that's how the system should work.
It's like the penalty points issued to the Danish vessels during the summer in the AOC when the Danish said no, we're not allocating them to the vessel, and that's the end of it. It has to be taken. The SFPA then have to take that up with the Commission. At what point does the department, as policymaker, become involved in actually seeing that these policies are actually working?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that on that particular issue, the SFPA is following up with the Danish authorities and the Commission on it. I mean, I think there are good reason why the Minister's office and the department isn't involved in the actual hands-on enforcement. And, you know, this is an operational matter. It's a bit like in Garda Síochána. You know, the Minister for Justice doesn't make operational decisions and shouldn't. Like, there shouldn't be political influence on issues like this. This is a matter of whether somebody catches what they have a quota to catch or not. And if they're breaking the rules, they should be, you know, they should be, like, the appropriate legal action should be taken. And introducing, you know, political views or policy or opinions into that kind of a role, I think, would be wrong and would obviously, you know, open up the system to undue influence and all the rest of it.
Well, it's not a question of views or policies, it's a question of whether the policy is working or not. At what point does a member state become involved in talking to other member states about how the policy...
Oh, sorry, that goes on all the time. I mean, like, the broader policy decisions, I mean, that's why we have a new common fisheries policy. You know, what the policy does is try to ensure that the quota that are allocated to member states are what's caught, which is why we're dealing with discards as we are, which is why we have a new regional decision-making process, which is about policy and looking at better mechanisms for implementation. But once those policy decisions are taken, the actual implementation responsibilities are with the SFPA. But if it's not working, we have to change it. You know,
I mean, that's the whole point.
And that's why the group that I was talking about earlier that meet across a number of member states are actually trying to improve that enforcement capacity. That's why they're talking about observers on vessels, and that's why we're talking about cameras now for the first time, which is certainly not being looked for by the industry, I can tell you.
Deputy Ferris.
Yeah, Minister,
actually the Dutch aren't anti-cameras. It's other member states don't want cameras. But I don't think I'm not satisfied that cameras will solve the problem. By the way.
That's why the Dutch want them. They don't want the observers.
But it's the observers, I think, are the ones that
Deputy Ferris.
Yeah, well, I think it's evident that the only way the most foolproof way you can deal with a situation like that, and it applies to every boat, outdoor type of vessels, factory vessels, and the big refrigerated vessels, sea belted tanks and so forth, is having an observer on board. And I find it very difficult to understand that for a number of weeks, and it's just 5 weeks now, that nobody's been able to get on board them. Like you had bad weather, it maybe blow over in 24 hours, whatever it was, well. And you know, I think they can be boarded, but it's essential, Minister, that because when you have rumour or reality of grading fish on board and not observing a discard ban, I think that is wide open to abuse, and the amount of fish that's been killed and lost in that regard is doing huge damage to the whole stock itself, and that needs to be dealt with. And
it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I mean, like, that is now blatantly illegal. Let's just be clear.
Yeah,
grading is the same as discarding, except it's just mulching up the fish.
Mulching up the fish, and that is.
Equipment on board. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And if you have an observer on board, you'll stop all that.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only way to go forward.
Yeah.
It's to use whatever influence you have that you will have observers on board from the member states.
Okay. Listen, this is very important.